Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and this is a video all about character. And I don't mean that from a moral high ground, I just mean that we have character defining moments in our lifetime. Particularly, I think it's in moments of reflection where you're looking back at missteps, mistakes, misunderstandings, selfish choices, just poor choices in general. You have that fork in the road moment where you're reflecting on it, and it's about how you move forward from that mistake that I think truly defines your character. Now, I think character is applicable beyond humans. I think character is applicable to companies, and that character defines the games they'll make in this case, the decisions they'll make across their business. Character is important to all of us, right? And EA is showing their true character here today. There's been a lot said about BioWare. In fact, so much said now about Dragon Age: The Veilguard that I was ready to lie BioWare to rest until we had more information on the next Mass Effect game, because what really hasn't been said at this point in time? As we covered in our last video, the studio is now below 100 people, and they're in a really rough spot at BioWare. All the pressure is on the next Mass Effect to perform, and while the skeleton crew that they have assembled for the next Mass Effect game is a crew that I do have confidence in because it's all OG Golden Age BioWare veterans, EA is making it very difficult to believe that this project will not be tampered with, because they feel vindicated after a very troublesome development cycle with Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and we're going to sink our teeth into all of that right here and now with this headline from Eurogamer. If you're new here, you're into what's going on in the industry, consider subscribing. We talk about everything at this point. All right, so the headline is, EA suggests Dragon Age: The Veilguard might have sold better if it was live service. So what does this mean for Mass Effect? Now, to be fair and to be transparent, the words live service are never uttered here in these sentences from EA's CFO and CEO. However, it's strongly implied, as we'll read here. They say, speaking to investors last night following the release of EA's latest quarterly results, both EA boss Andrew Wilson and the company's chief financial officer suggested the game's offline, one-and-done nature was to blame for it, not meeting the publisher's sales expectations. Quote, in order to break out beyond the core audience, games need to directly connect to the evolving demand of players who increasingly seek shared world features and deeper engagement alongside high-quality narratives in this beloved story, Wilson said. Dragon Age had a high-quality launch and was well-reviewed by critics and those who played... Okay, moving on. However, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market. So those are the thoughts of the CEO, and we'll get into the history of Dragon Age: The Veilguard and its development cycle in a moment, but let's hear what the CFO had to say about this matter. They say, Dragon Age: The Veilguard underperformed, icing the competitive dynamics of the single-player RPG market, EA's chief financial officer, Stuart Canfield, said, leaving little wiggle room for how EA sees the genre's future. Historically, blockbuster storytelling has been the primary way our industry brought beloved IP to the players, Canfield continued. The game's financial performance highlights the evolving industry landscape and reinforces the importance of our actions to reallocate resources towards our most significant and highest potential opportunities. So, combining these two together, we hear shared world features, we hear that, you know what, the players are looking for something more like that, alongside deeper engagement, and that we need to shift our priorities to higher potential situations. Like, hey, if Dragon Age is going to flop, we may as well give it the best chance to explode upon a potential success, which a live service game can find, where everyone's getting in on that big co-op game. Let's get down to brass tacks on a couple of things here. Number one, sticking with character. The biggest problem I think AAA has, next to its bloating development budgets and philosophies, is just, to me, clear as day, their inability to read the room on a corporate level, I should say, and be able to understand why things are happening the way they are. It's the same thing I talked about with Phil Spencer and Todd Howard following the release of Starfield Shattered Space. Look, I adore Bethesda Game Studios. They're one of my favorite ever game developers, and I know that's taboo to say, but I love their stuff. Starfield, I was a little mixed on, but then the DLC had a lot of hope for it with Shattered Space. It did not deliver, and like I said, character-defining moment. Okay, to me, outside of the obvious ones like your horse armor or the Wasteland Workshop stuff, probably Bethesda's worst DLC. But what do you learn from that, and how do you buckle down moving forward? What are the key lessons you learn from that? And as I highlighted in videos covering that DLC, Bethesda's main takeaway, alongside Phil Spencer, was that they should have included the buggy that they gave away as a free update as part of the DLC. It had nothing to do with its weak content, its storytelling structure, its lack of companion reactivity, etc., etc. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse with Shattered Space. I know it comes up pretty often in my videos, but it is a perfect example to point to and be like, that was a character-defining moment. There was a lot that people were complaining about. The buggy, while not great in Starfield, was certainly not one of them. It's additive and frankly, most times, not even necessary to the core gameplay experience there. It was a moment where Bethesda had the opportunity to recognize why we as consumers felt shafted by the experience, but they did not. In fact, they identified something that many people didn't even find to be an issue with the expansion at all, and then boldly suggested they shouldn't have given us something for free for an extremely successful game, but rather just sold it to us instead. Not really brilliant at the end of the day. Recently, we saw the exit of the president for Warner Bros. Games, which is a plummeting side of the gaming sphere right now. We already saw something like Suicide Squad, but one that's less covered is Multiverses, which I think is one of the most mishandled releases that we've seen. When Multiverses hit the scene, it was absolutely a movement. Like, finally, a great Smash Bros. Competitor. And thank goodness Nintendo competes with themselves, where we don't have to sit here and worry that they're going to get complacent with the next Smash Bros. Game, like maybe they would with a Pokemon game. Smash Bros. Has always been excellent, in my opinion, but it was awesome to see another really competent 2D platform fighter, and especially with its own spin and feel with a focus on 2v2, it was great. Then all of a sudden it got yanked from the market because they claimed the game was actually in a beta phase and they wanted to relaunch it a year later, which is obviously designed to artificially spike the player count again and make more money off the game again. And then it arrived back on the market. It barely did anything. And then Multiverses is now getting taken offline in May of this year. You know, this is a game that was first released in 2022, ahead of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But why would you remove a great revenue opportunity for yourself and then re-release it later when the buzz is over? Like, how do these companies not identify that, for example, you have this window of time where your game is the game to play. Multiverses was that. That zeitgeist is everything. Momentum is everything in this industry. And when you squander that, you squander any chance you have to succeed on that level again. So what we'll be paying attention to with WB, with a new president in hand, and obviously a lot of bad live service mistakes behind them, is how do they learn from their mistakes going forward? These things happen, I guess. They're bad mistakes or choices, but how do you learn moving forward? We'll see. Anyway, that was a bit of a detour, but EA's takeaway of Dragon Age the Veilguard failing is incorrect. Dragon Age the Veilguard failed for a number of reasons. At the center of it all is the core series identity, which I've run up and down a million times, so I'll keep it very brief. You look at where it started and where it ended up, it's a completely different ballgame. And I'm not just talking in tone, because I think if you had something more in line with even Inquisition, I think that would have been more acceptable for people. But we can't sit here and look at Baldur's Gate 3 in the face, which I know for a lot of developers and publishers, they said this is an extremely unique success. But I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely not, because at the core of Baldur's Gate 3 were character-defining choices. Larian put themselves and the games that they wanted to make first, which were reactive RPGs. Not what the boardroom wanted to make first, what they wanted to make first. Then Larian put the player first. They put us at the center of an experience with reactive choice and consequence. They had a great early access period to feel out what people liked and didn't like about their game, adjusted accordingly, and built up a little bit of a war chest that allowed them to invest in Acts 2 and 3. It was a brilliant business strategy from top to bottom. And of course, I'm not suggesting every title is going to be uniquely posed in the same situation that Larian was in. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that the RPG genre does not need any sort of major changes. If even the recent release of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was anything to go by, RPGs have legs. The first Kingdom Come Deliverance sold 8 million copies. That wasn't a sprint out the gate. Yes, many of those copies were sold on sale. But when you look at Entry 1, which hit 8 million copies, already the second game in 24 hours has sold over 1 million copies. That says a lot. I don't think RPGs are going anywhere. In fact, I think interest in RPGs is widespread, and people have been hungering for, granted this is a European developed RPG, but people have been hungering for a really good RPG that has westernized ideas, if you will, in its gameplay design, right? Which I think you can draw a line between Bethesda Game Studios and Warhorse and kind of the similar design philosophies they value and how much Warhorse has evolved them. So why did EA want to push this agenda here about live service? It's because originally that's what this game was supposed to be, which I imagine most of you already know, but for those who don't, this project went through 3 different phases. One was like this kind of heist, choice and consequence, tighter 30-hour RPG, which honestly sounded better than any rendition, on paper at least, of the game that we would have eventually got. Then we had a second version, which was live service. Like, this was the Dragon Age multiplayer game, which then got retooled into the single player game that we have now in Dragon Age, the Veilguard. So EA is seeing this opportunity to say to BioWare, we told you so. And while I defended EA a little bit in the idea that EA has meddled a bit, but BioWare has also been mismanaged for a long while, now we're seeing a moment here where BioWare's on their last game. EA is pushing that they were always right, and what's up next but Mass Effect 5? And the real question is will EA push Mass Effect into live service? And I that sentence makes me sick to my stomach, but they think they're right at this moment in time. They think this is the route for single player RPGs, and they're showing right here, as we're seeing on paper, they're showing that they think the RPG market has stagnated, which again is the worst lesson they could have ever learned from all of this, because it's the exact opposite. It's not just random anomalies. Oh, a Baldur's Gate 3. Oh, a Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Dragon's Dogma 2 shows up. Hell, even games like Starfield, which people trash on, was a top 10 selling game in 2023, which was an extremely competitive year. The list goes on. RPGs are all the rave, and as I mentioned earlier, RPGs have longer legs than most single player games because people buy them on sale, people return to them often, people want to play them on other platforms. It's just a special breed of a genre. And when you walk away from that and think that the solution is live service, you've completely missed the mark. Now, if I were to say anything to be fair to EA, they are speaking to investors who just want to hear like, where's my money, bro? How am I going to get my money? I thought this was going to be a big money-making opportunity for us. How are we going to get our money? So sometimes, even if you don't know what you're going to do next, maybe you just kind of talk a little bit and just say, you know, things that might ease investor pressure. I don't know. It is a different ball game versus what I imagine internal conversations are. But I look at the staff that they've assembled for the next Mass Effect game, and I'm like, that shit better be single player. That's all I'm saying. Like, if this is BioWare's last game, right, they deserve one thing here, and that is simply this: complete lack of involvement from EA. Okay, whether you want to blame EA or BioWare, or in my case, I think the blame is shared a bit. Whoever you want to blame in this situation, I don't care about anymore. Give BioWare the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet and let them fail or succeed on their own merits. Let them make the game that they want and go out in a blaze of glory, or end up saving the company. But this is the moment that they deserve at the end of the road here, which I know is a big ask, right? We're asking EA to be like, all right, this company that's mismanaged itself multiple times now has the opportunity to save themselves or destroy themselves. They're already, we know, a game away from closing down, so I feel like you may as well let them make the game they want. But do I see EA doing that at the end of the day? It's tough to say, especially when you're seeing what's on paper here. Like, you know, that they feel like the way forward is significant high potential opportunities, shared world features. You know, if you have something like what Mass Effect 3 had, where there is this kind of war system going on in the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer that can then kind of fade into the campaign. So when you're fighting in the multiplayer, you were progressing your story mode a little bit. I'm okay with that. That to me was totally fine. I thought the multiplayer in Mass Effect 3 ruled. I'll happily play it again, over and over and over. Still to this day, I wish that they, when they re-released with the Legendary Edition Mass Effect 3, that it came with the multiplayer. I know there were rumors for a while that the multiplayer for 3 was going to come out, so I don't know why they didn't do anything with it, but nonetheless, I love that multiplayer. And if that is their kind of approach of appeasing both sides, I don't think, based on the last 2 Mass Effect games we've seen in 3 and Andromeda, including that multiplayer mode and having it sort of influence the story a little bit is the worst thing in the world. But if we're talking like, we can get just pure single player Mass Effect with no distractions, I'd love that. Especially with BioWare being a smaller team now. You can't do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. So we'll see what decision they make. But again, this is a character defining moment for EA. This is a moment where they had a fork in the road. They had a bit of a failure on their hands. There's a lot of blame to go around on why Dragon Age Veilguard went south. But I can promise you this, EA, if you end up seeing this video, it did not fail because it was single player. If anything, you would not have had a fraction of the players you got if this game was multiplayer. and this thing would have been doomed. You think with all the conversation online, people would have flocked to check this thing out if it was a multiplayer too, which no other entry in the series had? Core series identity matters. It is so important because people get to know and fall in love with something, and they don't want to see it dramatically change. Change is natural in the evolution of series. I think that's a part of the plot a lot of gamers have lost their grip on, is that games will evolve and change and introduce new ideas. Not everything's going to be safe and stagnant, but it would be a radical change for a Dragon Age game, a mainline Dragon Age game, mind you, to come out and say we're full multiplayer. Same thing with Mass Effect. So I'm hoping that if this is BioWare's last game, which it could be, that EA allows BioWare to go out on their own standards at the very least and make the game that they truly want to make, because there's just been, again, mismanagement and messing around on both sides. So I'd like to, at least as a lifetime BioWare fan, and they made my favorite game ever, see them step out and present a Mass Effect 5 as they envision. Not like, all right, like EA wanted a little bit of this, we're going to do a little bit of that. Again, what do the developers want to make? Not what does the boardroom want? So we'll see what happens. But ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts. So let me know what you're thinking about what's going on with this BioWare situation with EA. Fire away down below. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.